The brand new Superman movie is on its way, and so it's the perfect time to give out some comic book recommendations if you want to read some more Superman.
It's morphin' time!
Hello, this is Soundout here, and today we're going to be talking about Superman comic recommendations. This isn't necessarily like my top favorites or anything, but this is more kind of how to get into Superman stories, and specifically focusing on the essence of Superman and the way that I perceive the character, and the way that I think these stories best portray who is Superman. So you're not going to see like versions that stray off of the core essence of the character. You're not going to see me recommend Injustice, for example. That's an evil Superman story. None of those are in here. And we're only going to be focusing on the core essence of the character, because I feel like a lot of adapted media have sort of let Superman down in a way that people don't really understand what makes Superman so great. So this list is going to be my list of recommendations for stories you should read in order to understand who Superman is. And if you enjoy something like this, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Help this video go up the charts and see if more people will see it. I've got several examples here from different eras, and I think these will kind of boil down what are good starting points to read Superman if you want to understand the character better. So I think our easiest place we're going to start with is out-of-continuity stories. These are not in the main DC canon, but are sort of Elseworlds or slight adjacent Elseworlds. And I think these are also just really good if you're trying to get into the books, but are a little daunted by the overall continuity. I always say, though, with comic books, you just jump right in with what you think looks cool and just don't worry about the continuity. It'll all fall naturally eventually. You know, I started reading Batman comics with the debut of Azrael Batman, which I picked up like almost 10 years after it happened, and I was fine. I eventually caught up on it. It's a thing that people overthink. I have an entire video about it, actually, about how the overthinking of how to get into comics. If you want to read it, just read it. So let's go with some out-of-continuity recommendations. These are going to be mini-series that are standalone that'll kind of help lead you into things. So we have Superman for All Seasons. Now this isn't a personal favorite of mine, but it is highly regarded, and I think it is still a good starting point. This is done with wonderful artwork by Tim Sale and written by a person I don't like very much, Jeff Loeb. Look up Jeff Loeb Daredevil TV show if you want more details. But the thing with this comic is it's still really well done. This was coming off of Batman The Long Halloween, which was one of the more famous Batman comics, and it's kind of done in the same style. It's supposed to be kind of a boiled down essence of the character type story, and so for that I do recommend checking it out. Now, personally speaking, something from the same era that I think kind of accomplishes the task better is Superman Birthright by Mark Waid and Lionel Francis Yu. This book is not only gorgeously illustrated, but the storytelling it's doing is kind of a modern origin of Superman and kind of adapting a lot of his elements into one seamless version. You can kind of see the building of Superman all the way up to who he is in the present day, and it's a really great read. I really do love Superman Birthright. If anything out of the three I'm going to say, this is probably my favorite, but I do recommend checking it out. There are some other like interpretations of the Superman origin that have come up. I know Jeff Johns did the one that I think is technically in canon for pre-Flashpoint, which is Secret Origin, which is good, but I don't like it as much. I would say Birthright is a pretty good read to pick up and check out, and I think it's getting a compact edition soon, so it makes it even easier to check out this series. But I do recommend Superman Birthright. It's brought up a lot in the best Superman stories, but I think not brought up enough. And then my third pick in this space would be Superman Space Age by Mark Russell, Mike Allred, and Laura Allred. This is an incredible book if you like history. The way that the series progresses is in real time. So you start at the beginning of the story and things progress year by year. And so there's some time jumps in the years going forward, and it shows how Superman would react to real world events. There is a lot of great stuff in here with the way reporting is done, with the way Lois and Clark are reporting on certain events. Like there is a whole thing where Lois and Clark are trying to figure out who's going to cover Watergate. There's talk of the civil rights movement. It's going through American history through the lens of the Superman characters and how they would react to it if they lived in our real world, and how that world would be different over time. And it also has kind of like this really cool tie-in to sort of Crisis on Infinite Earths and the way that like sliding time scales can be. And it gets down to the essence of the character and a reflection of our current reality. And I think that's kind of something really cool and special that Space Age does that the others don't. The other's going to be in the DC continuity. This one sits a little bit closer to real-world history and how that would change if Superman existed in it. And so for that, if you're a history buff, it's going to be Space Age, a good recommendation for you. But of course we have in-continuity stories to talk about, and I have plenty of picks for you here. So writer Alan Moore is pretty famous within comic book circles, from everything from Saga Swamp Thing to Watchmen. He's done a lot for DC. Do you also know that he's one of the best writers on Superman? Yeah, it's kind of crazy considering all of his Superman tales are in this one hardcover. Yeah, Alan Moore only wrote 3 Superman comics, but he kind of understands the character better than a lot of other creators do, and it's really impressive. And these 3 stories are all recommendations that I would put out for people wanting to read and learn more about Superman. So let's start with the basics. Alright, so Superman issue 423, which is titled Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, is listed as an imaginary tale, which was kind of their branding for, we're doing a weird little one-shot that doesn't impact continuity. But it was essentially to show the world past Superman. What happened to him afterwards, and, you know, how does the world move on without a Superman in it? Which really gets into the essence of the character. You also have Kurt Swan and George Perez on art, so it's already stellar in the art department. The storyline does continue in Action Comics 583, which is kind of going into the why did Superman leave? And these 2 tales together really form a complete story that shows the impact of Superman, a person like Superman, and how he makes an impact on the world. In fact, let me read you the opening text box for this, because I think it really does boil down Superman as a character. So the whole comic starts with, this is an imaginary story, which may never happen, but then again may, about a perfect man who came from the sky and did only good. It tells of his twilight, when the great battles were over, and the great miracles long since performed, of how his enemies conspired against him, and of that final war in the snow-blind wastes of the northern lights, of the women he loved and the choice he made between them, of how he broke his most sacred oath, and how finally all things he had were taken away, save for one. And that's kind of the essence of this story, is to kind of boil down to the person that is Superman, more so than just the things that Superman can do. And this kind of continues a little bit into DC Comics 85, which is Superman and Swamp Thing. Naturally, this was, of course, Alan Moore writing, because he was writing Swamp Thing at the time. This one I wouldn't say is like an essential Superman comic, but if you're going through the Alan Moore stories, here you go. It's a pretty fun one, though, and it goes with Swamp Thing and goes into the psyche of Superman and Clark Kent. And then we have Superman Annual number 11 by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, which is a legendary team up there. This is called For the Man Who Has Everything. This was actually adapted into a Justice League Unlimited episode by the same name, which keeps the same premise. So in this story, Batman and Robin and Wonder Woman are going to the Fortress of Solitude, and they had trouble figuring out what gift do we give Superman? What do we get for the man who has everything? And the story itself is actually that Superman's trapped in the Black Mercy plant thanks to Mongol, and he's seeing the life he could have had on Krypton. And so it gets down into the essence of the character and what is most important. You got great artwork and great fights between like Wonder Woman and Mongol, and you have different things going on. And also, I think it's the first time Diana met Jason Todd as Robin, which is pretty cool. Like I said, it was adapted into an episode of Justice League Unlimited, which had the same exact premise. They kept Robin out of it because of different rules and bat embargo stuff. But the idea that, like, what would Superman's life be if Krypton never exploded all comes from this book, and it's really great. So any of these stories from Alan Moore, I think, are really iconic stories that really get to the essence of the character, and I highly recommend them. And if you can find the deluxe hardcover, which is, you know, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, it's such a solid read right there. But those are my recommendations. I recommend checking out any of those. Really good starting points. So up to this point, we've looked at things that are one-shots, miniseries, 12 issues at most. Let's talk about some in-continuity, long-form story arcs, because this is also the fun of comics. You can have some really long eras going on. So let's start with a personal favorite, which is the storyline Return of Superman. And the Return of Superman storyline is following the death of Superman, which is a pretty famous comic. But the era that came after that is one of my favorites of all time. Now, I'm not going to say it's the best Superman comic ever written, but it is downright, I think my favorite Superman storyline is the Reign of the Superman and the Return of Superman. They kind of butt up against each other. This older trade, which I'm going to upgrade to an omnibus soon, is kind of like has both of them in it. But essentially what we're talking about here is that after the death of Superman, other people filled the void that Superman left. There was 4 different Superman that appeared. There was what would become known as Cyborg Superman. We had Superboy, Steel, and Eradicator. And each one of these characters embodied an aspect of Superman. You had Cyborg Superman, who looked like Superman, and it was plausible that, oh, maybe he survived by becoming a cyborg. You had Eradicator, who looked like Superman but was more violent and would just attack criminals directly and had energy blasts, so it just seemed kind of off even though he looked exactly like him. Superboy was saying, hey, I'm a clone of Superman, I'm the next best thing. And then you had John Henry Irons as Steel, who was embodying the values of Superman while also being the Man of Steel. Man of Steel, Man of Tomorrow, all the monikers kind of come up here. But more specifically, each of them takes on a bit of a different of the personality, the look, the style, the heart. And especially, this is what I love about Steel as a character, is that John Henry Irons saw that there was no Superman and stepped up as a normal guy. He didn't pretend to be Superman, but he carried the S-Shield to carry Superman's values while he was gone. And that is what I love about this. And again, if we're talking about the essence of Superman as a character, how best if it's not reflected through 4 different versions? And also, how mirrors can sometimes be broken. And that is really fun. The other cool part, too, is, of course, Superman does return at the end of the storyline, and it really resolves in a very interesting, unique way. If you don't know what happens in the story, I do recommend checking it out. I'm not going to spoil the ending for it, but it's really great. It's one of my favorites, absolutely. Now, if you're wanting to kind of get a little bit more natural of a lead-in into this, you could read Death of Superman, obviously. Death and Return in general is kind of what this segment's for, but I really do like this era, this half of it more. But I'm actually going to back it up and get into some more Superman if you want to read longer stories than just this major arc. And that would be the Triangle Years. So this is a fun little history tidbit. So during the 1990s, in Superman comics, there was 4 titles happening all at once. Superman, Adventures of Superman, Action Comics, and Superman the Man of Steel. And so group editor Mike Carlin decided to start connecting the stories together, and essentially in a way that it wouldn't just be 4 separate Superman books, but that they would have an ongoing living continuity. And the way this was accomplished to tell the reader is something I wish we could still see, because when you go to read comics nowadays, it can be kind of tricky to figure out how they connect together. When you read a character like Blue Beetle or Ghost Rider, you're fine. They have 1 book at most, right? But when you have like Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, they have like 2 or 3 ongoings at a time. So what they ended up doing was they put these triangles on the cover. So this one says 1991-9, because Action Comics 663 is the 9th book released in 1991, and that is the continuity order. That is something I wish would come back with any characters that have multiple titles going on, because you can read these issues so much easier by just following the triangle numbers on the front. You can also read them easier because the omnibus just puts them all in order, but the thing I love about it is that you have that easy to follow continuity, no matter what point in time you're reading it. Now, the reason why I recommend the Triangle Years in general is because you have a lot of stuff that just kind of exists as part of the lexicon of Superman. There's the wedding of Clark and Lois. There is a bunch of stuff happens with Lex Luthor. There's a really interesting storyline with Supergirl, and you start to get characters like Steel introduced. And this is what leads into the Death of Superman and leads out of the Return of Superman into another interesting era. So if you're wanting to read like what I think is a pretty solid, easy to follow continuity section of Superman, the Triangle era is probably going to be a good place. You do have to go with some 90s comicsisms. It's not, you know, like timeless per se, but I really like it, and I really enjoy this era of Superman comics, and I highly recommend it. So my next recommendation is a more modern one, and is my personal favorite era of Superman comics of all time. And we're talking the Rebirth era. Superman in particular was done by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason, and is my favorite run on Superman comics ever. My favorite storyline is Return of Superman and the whole Reign of Superman era, but my favorite run is this run. This was taking Superman into a new direction. A lot of times in Western comics, especially from Marvel and DC, characters can feel a bit stagnated, where they don't have any major growth. But in this case, Superman's married with Lois and has a son, John Kent, who has superpowers, who's becoming the new Superboy. And that is the ethos of this book. This is a family book, in the sense that it's Superman, it's Clark, it's Lois. It's them trying to be parents. It's them trying to juggle everything else going on. How does he deal with that? How does he work with that? And that is the core ethos of this book. And that is why it's my favorite. Because if you're talking about the core logistics of Superman as a character, how better than him trying to raise a son? And that is what is so great about it. It's not a problem-free, idealistic life. They have issues they go through, but you can feel the love of this family and watch this character of John Kent progress and grow throughout the run. And it's really, really brilliant. I really can't recommend it enough. And it did run for a significant amount of time. In the original hardcovers here, we had 4 of these big old deluxe hardcovers. They've now done an omnibus of everything in this, and I couldn't recommend that enough. Like, you can just get the entire thing in one go. But the way that they pull this whole story together is just incredible. In total, it's 45 issues. You know, pretty long run, all things considered. Not as long as Triangle Years. That lasted about a decade. But I can't recommend this series enough. It just, you really get down to, like, what makes Superman Superman when he has to try to, like, you know, answer that question for his son, right? Like, what does his son think of all this? How does his son, you know, react to all this? And it was such a great arc for the characters. And also the nice part is he's only wrapped up in a couple crossovers, so you don't have to worry about, like, you know, reaching out and having to, like, read a crossover event every 3 issues. It is mostly self-contained outside of a couple crossovers. And if you want to take an expansion beyond this, in the same era, I'd also recommend the Dan Jurgens work. So Dan Jurgens did this series called Lois and Clark, which is kind of to explain and set up the Rebirth Superman era, because this was dealing with the fallout of the Convergence event. It's something you should read if you like continuity stuff, but if you're not worried about it, it's not an essential read, but it is still a pretty good series. It kind of introduces a lot of the elements and sort of cleans up the continuity between you know, the New 52 era and the Rebirth era. So pretty good for that. And then Dan Jurgens also had a run on Action Comics parallel at the same time. Now, the Action Comics run is less focused on the family aspects, and it's what the Tomasi run was doing in Superman. But the Jurgens run here is really solid because it's kind of your classic Superman storylines. You got, like, big action, big events. I mean, the first storyline involves Doomsday. Lots of cool stuff. Here's, like, a cool crossover with Booster Gold. And this ran, like, all the way up to issue 1000 of Action Comics. And this was a really great era as well. It's a good companion. A lot of this stuff deals with Lex Luthor wanting to be his own Superman and being a good guy. It deals with Lois Lane going back to the Daily Planet. Lots of great stuff. I would say that, like, the way the split kind of works is that this is more your big Superman action pieces and kind of your big, you know, sort of conflicts with characters like Lex, whereas the Superman run in the same era is more about the family and raising John. And so you have 2 different sides of it, but it all is part of the character of Superman. And I think they pair incredibly well together. And again, it's my favorite era of Superman comics, hands down. Now, for my last recommendation, I don't have a print copy of it because I've been reading it on DC Universe. I'm kind of waiting to see if they'll do an omnibus in a couple years. It is the current run by Joshua Williamson. This has been a really fun Superman run. A lot's happened since the Rebirth, so if you're just reading off my recommendations only, there's a lot of continuity stuff. Like I said, don't worry about it. This run has been really stellar. It's been introducing new ideas while pulling together some, like, familiar ones, and it's been really fun. It did get bogged down in a couple crossover events like Absolute Power. Like, everything got bogged down by Absolute Power. Just read the tie-ins, trust me. Absolute Power may not be worth your time. But Superman by Williamson has been great. It's still going. They've been introducing new elements and exciting things, and I've been really enjoying it. So I would also recommend checking it out. It's also the easiest to get into because it's the current ongoing run. But that would be it for recommendations. I don't want to overwhelm, and I also could just sit here and recommend every Superman comic I like, but I try to be picky. And there's a lot of cool stuff out there. Superman as a character is so amazing and so unique and special, and it's nice to see when the character is used well, and hopefully that's the case with the upcoming Superman movie. I would really like to see a really great Superman on screen. From what I've seen so far, we got the potential for it. Let's see if they can stick the landing. So that does it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the notification bell if you haven't already. Really appreciate both those things. It just does immense help on the channel. It's so quick, it's easy, but really helps the videos out, and I do appreciate it. Leave any comments, questions, concerns down below. If you think I left something off that should have been on here, please let me know. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the list. If you'd like to continue the conversation, we have a Discord server you can join, the link below. And if you want to help support the channel directly, we have channel memberships available with perks like early access to videos and member-exclusive live streams. Let's give some special shout-outs to our channel members. Special shout-out to all of our channel members, including Captain Tier, Spin-54, Masterbin95, Forever1000, Super Shags Boom, Professional Troll Taylor, Jeffrey Piemonte, Lacey Dean, Ben Nguyen, Mr. Arrowverse16, Jamie's World, Centeroth, The Clueless Collector, Z-Man 12 Bat, Isabella Lawrence, Geets, TRPCRD, Omega Singh, Kakiku Kaku, Mario Anthony Gangwon, Ben Odinson, and Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful support of this channel. If you so wish, I'm on social media on Blue Sky at Soundout12. You can find my wonderful graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. You can find Hero Club at HeroClub.com for comic reviews and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, up, up, and away!